Welcome to the MHP Exchange podcast, where industry veterans Frank Rizzo and Eric Busadil generously share their wealth of knowledge in their new podcast dedicated to the manufactured housing space. They tackle tough questions to provide valuable insights for those considering investments in mobile home parks. If you're seeking answers in the manufactured housing space, this podcast is your go-to resource.
Welcome back to the MHP Exchange podcast. Frank Rizzo here. Joining me, as always, or at least most of the time, Eric Busadil. How are you doing today, Eric?
When I can, I join you, Frank.
Oh, well,
I'm good.
Well, I appreciate you joining me today, and I absolutely appreciate you wearing the beige pants to really throw things off a little bit. We have a very special guest today. Somebody and he's got a great story, and I can't wait to hear this. I mean, this is someone who likes to call himself like the accidental landlord. Started with one rental property, and he became the largest manufactured housing operator in New York State. And that's Jeff Cook from Cook Properties. How you doing today, Jeff?
Good, Frank. Hey, Eric. How you guys doing?
Doing good today. Doing good, Jeff.
Jeff, before we get started, and there's a lot of things that I'd like to uncover and unravel with you today, because for where you are and the scale of where you are right now, I think is so important for people out there looking to get started in the space or looking to scale up their business. But why don't you give everybody a little brief history of how you got here, right? So everyone kind of knows your story and who you are.
Sure. Yeah, I can be brief, but hopefully descriptive enough. I've never it's interesting, Frank. I've never considered myself the accidental landlord, but you're that's good. You're exactly right. I had
Jeff,
a single
next
family.
week he's gonna hold on. Next week he's gonna call himself the accidental landlord. That's what's gonna happen.
And wearing brown pants, right?
While he's wearing brown pants, driving my car.
So I had a job, I got a master's degree in public administration, and I ended up getting a job doing market research for a customer satisfaction research company. I bought a single family home. I had a couple of my buddies living in there to help defray costs. For whatever reason, they decided to bail, go home, save some money. And I was left by myself in this big old city house. And I'm like, I don't want to carry this whole thing myself. I'm not going to have any money left to, go out and have fun, etc. So I rented it. And that was the start of how I got to where I am today. I moved home. I was making decent money. So I started buying singles and doubles in the city of Rochester. Got up to about 100 units in the city. I quit my job and did that for about 10 years. Learned and made a ton of mistakes through the process, but how to maintain houses, how to manage the books, how to manage a real estate business with some very challenging older properties and some very challenging lower income residents. Fortunately, I got lucky. I was prepared. They say luck is when opportunity meets preparedness. I had someone who approached me that wanted to buy all my properties. I was ready. I was prepared, and I sold them. I wanted to move into more commercial space. I thought retail, office, that was the sexy asset class that I wanted to get into, and hopefully with much less headache than I was experiencing in the city. So I bought a few of those, some office retail properties, and I bought a mobile home park. I had one broker that continually kept pushing them to me to look at, and I was like, I don't know, I don't really want to go from the city poor to the country poor. That was my stigma. That was where I came from. I didn't want to get into the trailer park business. So I went and looked at this park. It was up in Sandy Creek, about halfway between Syracuse and Watertown. It was gorgeous park. It was relatively new. It was built in the 90s, all double wides, all seniors. And I was like, this is beautiful. Had 40 storage units that came with it. So I bought it. And in about 6 months, I was like, oh my gosh, this is great. No one's calling me to fix a broken door. No one's calling me for lost keys. I got to buy more of these. and so I started buying more. Again, just kept going and going, and buying more communities. So now we're up to about 105 communities throughout New York State. We have 7,200 pads. We serve about 10,000 residents, and then we still have a small quantity of some office, retail, and some storage units. Um, so that's where we are. That's where we are today, Frank and Eric. It's been
Wow.
about 15 years since I bought my first park. So about 2008. Actually, no, yeah, 17, 18 years.
And you're currently the largest mobile home park operator in the entire state of New York.
Yeah, that's correct. We are the largest. We I think number two is I think there are about 4,000 lots. So we're quite a ways ahead of number two.
So Jeff, the that is an amazing story. Most amazing thing, most interesting thing to me is, I would love to understand how, how you're doing that in New York. Like, what obstacles are you going through in the most tenant friendly state? Obviously, there's a lot of laws and stuff in New York that affect housing a lot differently than the rest of the country. Love to. I'm sure everyone else would also love to hear, some key topics and pointers, or just maybe some information on how you're doing that. I'd love to understand a little bit more about that.
Yeah, I mean it's not easy, but at the same time we've never owned outside of New York, so it's kind of like you don't know what you don't know. I grew up in New York. I was born and raised here. Spent all my time here. Minus a couple of years in DC for an internship. Um, I hear stories of how other states are, and I get jealous, but you know, we know what we're doing. Not only are we the largest, but I like to say that we've seen it all as far as how New York is run. Um, Again, I don't want to say we're experts, but I mean we do the best we can, and we have to navigate navigate the regulations. Um, yeah, New York State is extremely tenant friendly. Not only regulatory wise, but in practicality, with how the courts are run, um, how the how the tenants, I don't want to say behave, but how the tenants interact with us, is challenging. Um, but we get through it. We try to be as nimble as we can, and we do what needs to be done to get the job done. We have rent control, which started 6 years ago, so we're pretty adept at that right now. We can raise rent 3% by right. We can raise rent an additional 6% as long as we can document that increase from 3 to 6% in expenses, be that taxes, capex, operating expenses, etc. So we have been, ever since COVID, we have been generally raising at 6% across the board, minus a few communities, because our expenses have increased, and in most communities, our expenses have actually increased significantly more than 6%. So we're still not capturing everything, but we're doing the best we can. Um, we're continually getting challenged by residents. When we when we do raise the rent 6%, we've had at least probably 8 or 10 lawsuits from residents challenging our 6% increase, and it's really just a math equation. So I know it sounds horrible, but it's really not that big of a deal. Again, we're kind of getting, I guess, a little bit immune to it because we've gone through it for so many times. The first lawsuit we got was like, oh my God, this is going to be devastating. We're just, how are we going to get through this? What are we going to do? We're going to have to give the keys back. And it didn't go that way, because the simple thing is that we did the right thing. We're raising the rent 6%. We put the money back into the community in the best way that we think works for the community. So again, it's certainly not a walk in the park. But we always try to do the right thing. We try to do what's right for the residents. even though they do give us some of them can be very difficult at times. But if we do the right thing by the residents, it will turn out the best for us.
So, and that's a great segue, because when you talk about the tenants and then you talk about the application of the laws, for those that aren't familiar with New York laws, in New York City, and I'm sure it's probably pretty similar upstate, but in New York City, if a tenant hasn't paid you, and now obviously you're contacting them and they're in New York City and you're saying, hey, you owe me rent, and they can claim that it's harassment. That you're actually harassing the tenant by asking them to live up to their contractual obligation to pay you. And once they do that, then it pivots to that the landlord's being harassing the tenant, which is one of the reasons why I looked to not own and operate any longer inside of New York City. And we were looking for a pivot because we saw some of this happening down the road. Like when we started looking in 2016, I was like, the tenant laws that are coming down the road are going to be very onerous, and it's a challenge for us. And a lot of times we found that the judges wouldn't have an equal application of the law. Like they would look at it and they would kind of default to the tenant, and they would try to make it as easy for the resident as possible, even if they weren't fulfilling their obligation. What's one of those legal battles that you had with those residents that you were able to overcome, that where maybe the tenant or the judge wasn't looking at the law and applying it the way that you thought, hey, this is the field of play, this is what should happen, and the judge is not really acting or officiating that way. They're kind of allowing all these other things to play into that decision, into their decision, right? Have you had a case like that where you had to overcome that with a tenant?
100%. It happens all the time. All of our eviction cases they're all local. They're handled by the, local county or town municipality, and all the judges are different and they apply the law, even though you think it would be the same, they all apply it differently. We just, our main goal obviously is to get the home back, to get the non-paying resident out, and we do whatever is needed to do that. Sometimes we'll do cash for keys so we can avoid going to court. We know that in general we're not going to collect on that judgment even if we get it, so we'll do a cash for keys program. If a resident will move out, well, before we get to cash for keys, if a resident will move out, we'll wipe their balance clean. Our residents are pretty savvy. A lot of them know that they don't have to do that, which they don't. We'll offer cash because we know how much it's going to cost us in lost rent, in eviction costs, in court costs, attorney's fees. We'll offer them money to vacate and wipe their balance. Our main goal is to just to get control of that home, and to get them out of there. We're working with about 4 different attorneys throughout the state because we are all over the state. It's hard for one attorney to be able to handle everything. So our attorneys, all of which we've worked with for a number of years, they all have, I don't want to say good relationships, but they have relationships with the judges. They know what to expect from them. And so they know how to handle the case. But yeah, it's definitely challenging. We haven't heard anything about the harassment thing. Some judges are good, Frank and Eric, others are not so good. Once you come out of New York City and you start getting a little upstate, and for us, unlike New York City guys, upstate for us is where we are, not Westchester. Upstate's upstate. But once you get out of New York City, we're Republican. It's primarily Republican minus the cities. I'm looking around where I am right now, and it's semi-rural. It's suburbia. But yeah, inside the cities is rough. So again, most of our communities are not in cities, so they tend to have a little bit more conservative judges, but they're still not as landlord friendly as we would like them to be.
Sure. Now, I want to jump into just your business itself, because you went from, obviously you started in 2008, and then you had like a big jump, like an exponential jump from like 2,000 to 7,000 lots, right? Is that how you grew? How was that growth spurt? Like, and how did you handle that operationally?
Yeah, so we in 2020 we were right around a couple thousand pads. We bought a oh man, maybe like an 800 pad portfolio in the Rochester area. We had to raise about $6 million for that purchase. That was right at the beginning of COVID. Um, when I raised that money for that purchase, it went really well. And those we still in those communities now. They've done very well for us. We're actually working on a supplemental right now, where we should be once we close on that, we will have returned everyone's capital and then some at the time of closing on the supplemental, that is. So after that, we just kept going. We raised a fund. We raised about $27 million to purchase 15 1,500 pads throughout New York State. Um, and then after that was our big purchase of AGL, and that was a 2,200 pad portfolio
Wow.
from one seller. Um, Scaling wasn't easy. It certainly was challenging, going from 2,000 to 3,500, 4,000 to 7,000. All had different challenges. um, I think probably my biggest mistake that I did was that I didn't hire forward, which is always difficult because you want to hire exactly when you need people and when you can afford it. Um, we needed more people before we could afford it. So that was a mistake I certainly made. I wish I would have made that. I should rephrase that. Not that we could afford it. You want to time payroll with cash flow, and you want to time payroll with having those properties for them to work on and work in. And leading up to closing, probably it would have been a good idea to start adding those people on until after we closed. So that was certainly a mistake that I made that would have helped things go a little bit more smoothly. Um, but other than that, I mean, it's really just all about payroll, people, and processes. Again, a lot of the processes we had to develop as we grew. Um, it was certainly it was a fun time. It was very challenging to just to keep everything moving and keep all the plates spinning. Uh, but we got there. We're in a really great spot right now. We're about 120 employees. We were as fat as 165, I believe, at one time. But we just realized we didn't quite need all those people. Um, we got great structure. We got great processes. Now we're ready. We're ready for more. We're certainly ready for more deals and
Ju-
more pads.
And Jeff, in regards to that, and obviously, we're not at the scale you are. Are most of your staff um, on the ground, on the community level? Do you have, you pick up a park? I mean, you hire three, four, five people to work that park, or do you have like a centralized location with, 50 employees at that location, and then the rest? How does, your organization, work out?
Yeah, no, hit the nail on the head. We're right around 50 employees at headquarters, and that's our support staff. That's our administration, our property managers, finance, et cetera. And then the balance are our maintenance and service guys and on-site managers. Um, most of our communities are focused in the 7 counties that surround Rochester. So most of our service guys, although they don't come to our main headquarters building on a regular basis, it is where our headquarters are. It's where, we source some of our equipment that isn't used all the time. It's where our fleet manager is. And again, all of our administration.
So
Our
you're off.
guys, we let our guys, I was just gonna say, we let our guys bring their trucks home. So most times it doesn't make sense for them to come to the office unless like we're having a company wide meeting or a maintenance staff meeting. They're mostly just going to the job and then home and back and forth.
So when you break out your org chart, it's property manager, and then do you have a regional manager on top of that, and then that flows up to the C level? Like how do you, not to get very wonky here, but I'd love to hear from larger operators exactly how you've structured that, internally with your staff.
Yeah, so we have we call them associate assistant regional property managers, ARPMs, and then those report up to a district manager. Each district manager usually has well, they have one or two assistants who help them to run their respective portfolio. It varies. Most of our district RPMs, district regional property managers, are running between 1,000 and 2,000 pads. And then those district RPMs report directly up to our chief operating officer.
Oh. And do you utilize any VAs?
We try to stay as flat as possible.
Okay. Do you utilize any VAs overseas, or are you using everybody in-house?
So we do have a call service that we utilize that's through Rent Manager, which is our main property software. So they may use some overseas people. I don't think a whole lot though. So the call center handles our service requests on the evenings, weekends, and holidays.
Got it.
The rest of the time it's handled by our assistant RPMs.
Okay. So, and now
we found the call center to be invaluable.
It's hugely valuable. I mean, we have an overseas staff and call center, which is great because they're able to answer requests that come in from residents, even if they own the homes. Like you're still getting calls and contacts, and you have to maintain that communication if you're not living there on the ground, right? I think that's one of the misconceptions about the space, where just because they own the home, resident owns the home, doesn't mean you don't have to touch them. Like you have to stay in constant contact, or they have to feel that there's a constant touch point to maintain that relationship to the community, which is super key. In terms of deal structure, I mean, obviously when you're starting out and you're scaling, right, you could buy a 50 unit, 100 unit park, right? You could do that. But at this point, does your deal, like the deals that you're looking at, change? Are you not going on a deal by deal basis? Do you only buy portfolios? Like, how do you structure your acquisitions now?
We'll look at anything, 30 pads on up, depending on how close it is to some of our other communities. If something out of New York State, for us to go outside of New York State, it would have to be pretty big, or a portfolio. But for the most part, we're primarily looking in New York State still.
So you will buy, and that's unusual because you hear a lot of larger players say that they stay away from the smaller parks, and we have this internal debate all the time about parks that are, say, sub 50 lots, right? Is it worthwhile to add on?
Yeah, but Frank, we do constantly have this debate, but we're not totally one-sided against it, right? We've been open and we've purchased properties that are 30 units if it's close to somewhere that we have an operation already, right? I mean, that's how we started. I think we're pretty strict on going far away if we don't want to be in that market, right? So if we don't want to be in that market, we're definitely not going to take on a 30 unit pad.
Correct.
So, I mean, for someone like him, I mean, I would imagine that, now, I mean, if you're strictly trying to stay in that parameter, I mean, you have a large enough staff, right, to just take that on, especially if it's, in the realm of where you are. Am I right?
No, you're absolutely right. If as long as it's close enough to something else that we already own, it's an easy bolt on. I mean, it's really we just bolt it on and start running it. But even like some spots of New York State, I like to use Plattsburgh as an example. We don't have anything in Plattsburgh. Now, if something came to us, a few hundred pads or, a couple hundred pad communities, we would certainly look at it. But we're not going to buy a 30 pad community in Plattsburgh because our next closest park is probably 4 hours away, 4 or 5 hours away.
Okay.
Outside of New York State, you know, I don't even know, like maybe, a couple hundred again, like you guys said, if it's something that where we want to plant a flag, yeah, 100 pad park would certainly get us there. A 50 pad park though, I'm not so sure unless we were going to make a consistent concerted effort to scale there.
And you mentioned outside of New York State. Are you outside of New York State currently?
We're not. We have one piece of land that we developed. Rather, we got entitled down in Great Court, South Carolina. It's just south of Greenville. We did end up getting that entitled for 75 homes on 25 acres with a 5 acre vacant parcel that we can do something else with. We got it cleared and grubbed and we decided that it's just not, we're so busy up here in New York State with our current communities and also with some of the development that we're working on, that we just decided to put the brakes on that. And we're kind of sitting on it, but if someone was interested, we might consider selling it too.
So an interesting point, because not a lot of people are doing development in the space. You've got that project in South Carolina, but you also had a project in LaGrange, Georgia, where there's a market that's obviously there's an affordability issue, there's a housing issue, there's a demand for housing in that Georgia market, but you here you had a book of, but what was the roadblocks that you had there?
Yeah, so LaGrange, we went all the way, man. We were that's part of the reason we put the brakes on Great Court there in South Carolina. We were there. I mean, we were there. We were at the last meeting for our approval to go ahead and do the project. And it got voted down. We had one councilman who we had everyone lined up. All the councilmen were, and women, council people. I'm not sure if there was any women. There wasn't any women on the board. But everyone was lined up and they were all in favor of it. They knew exactly what we were going to do. It was going to be a, land lease community. I don't remember exactly, somewhere around 100 homes or so. And a couple days beforehand, one councilman rallied some troops and they came and they were unhappy with what we were going to do. We really didn't have a chance to respond. And it was voted down. So we, pulled up our stakes and moved back, came back home. What I learned from that was a tough one, man. It's probably the only lesson I could get out of that is have a wider reaching public educational campaign type of thing. Bring the public in more. We had the government officials, both elected and appointed, and career on our side. But once the public hearing came, it just didn't go our way. That was probably the biggest lesson is, again, start early and start bigger as far as public education.
Yeah. And I think a lot of it is the stigma of,
it is. Yep.
There's the trail, because the stigma of, hey, there's a trailer park in town, but most of the trailer parks, and we typically, our buy box or our filters, typically we're taking over a multi-generational asset, right? That was built because, hey, we've got to create some income off of that land. And now that it's gone through maybe the second or the third generation, they're not true operators. It's more of an income stream for the family, and they haven't reinvested into that community. And that is maybe singed in the public's, mind. But then when you have an operator like yourself, who's obviously running well-run, professionally managed, communities, and showing real value, and you have an affordability crisis, and this is still the most affordable housing stock available, and creating a pathway to home ownership, it's amazing the pushback you still get on that.
Yeah, it's tough. It is an educational campaign. you know, a lot of people just don't know. And Frank, you know, like you said, they have that stigma of, you know, trailer, you know, just trailer parks. You know, these tin cans that look horrible, and the worst people live there. And it's a challenge, and it's a nationwide issue. One of the interesting things I like to comment on, or like I like to use as an example, is if you're ever listening to the news and there's something bad happens, like let's say, for example, there's a murder. They always say that.
Oh, we just lost Jeff. What we really picked up here, and this is for those that are. Oh, there he is. Okay.
There, you're back.
Yeah, well, you know what we were doing, Jeff? We just through AI, we have a AI version of Jeff Cook that was going to answer the last couple of questions, and so you know, we were almost there. We were just making a
I'm sure
AI Jeff Cook.
I'm sure he probably did better than the real Jeff Cook.
So what was your you know, getting back there, like I guess the biggest learning experience you had from the development is just the public education piece, right? That's something that you'd have to take a look at.
Yeah, I would just go. I don't know where we kicked off there, but I would start sooner, and I would start bigger with the public education piece and what exactly that you're going to do. If you can get, you know, I know maybe a factory tour if there's a factory close by. Um, if you have a community that's close by, maybe throw a model in there that is maybe on the higher end, maybe a little bit too expensive for that particular community, but more in line with what you're going to put in the new development.
Sure. Those are some great points and great tips. And just for anybody out there that's listening, because listen, obviously your story is a tremendous success story, and not everyone's going to be able to get to 7,000 pads or better. But what would you tell anybody scaling up or looking to scale their business? Like, what is a tip from Jeff Cook? Like, would be, this is what you really need to do, and these are some of the key points that will help you continue growing.
Yeah. I mean, you got to work hard. There's no doubt about that. You guys know that. You got to do the right thing. You got to do the right thing by your residents, by your employees. Even if it costs you money, you still got to do it. Spend a few bucks now, and that's going to come back to you, you know, multiple and you know, tenfold in the future. What else? Yeah, I think those are the big.
Oh, you know what I liked about what he just said there? It wasn't about him, right? But it's about the culture that you're going to create, right? It's about the culture you create in the community, and it's the culture you create inside your organization that allows you to grow. Because if you could start with culture first, that, you know, you're building culture, whether intentionally or unintentionally. But if you intentionally build culture, that seeds the ground for growth.
Got to do the right thing. That's what he said. You know, you do the right thing by your tenants, your residents. I mean, it's happened to us, you know, so many times, Frank. You know, you buy a community, you have, you know, people living in there for 20 years. They're on a fixed income. They're below market. You know, we've subsidized a lot of those residents. And, you know, you do the right thing and it comes back to you in the end. I also believe in what he said. You know, if you put the money in the right places, it comes back to you later on. You know, if you're going to try to, you know, ham and egg the existing, you know, pedestal that's been there for 40 years and you know it's on its way out, you know, it's going to give you problems sooner or later. So you got to get to it, put the money in, grow it for long term, and it comes back.
And you know, one of the interesting points, because we struggle with this too, it's always about hiring first. And somebody mentioned this to me before, and I think we've talked about it. When you look at hiring and somebody says, all right, I'm going to bring this person on and it's going to cost me $50,000 a year. The reality is it doesn't really cost you that $50,000 right? You got to look at it in buckets, right? So you take a look at, in the next 90 days, what that investment is going to be in that person. And then what's the value of having that person to do that work going to take or add to your organization. So if you look at it in smaller buckets, sometimes it's not so much about hiring first and making that huge investment, but breaking it down into smaller pieces. And Jeff, I know that you're back. This is obviously taped. We'll kind of cut and bring this back full circle. So we'll be able to do
Good.
that.
So,
It's not live except for the people listening. And I guess we were talking and just some of the stuff on some of the stuff that you talked about, building culture, which we thought was hugely important. And we like the fact that you talked about everything other than, hey, make sure my underwriting is here and I'm making X. It was all about culture, about putting in the work, and then building the right culture, both for your team and for your community, right? Is there anything else that you did, like a third thing that you'd say, hey, this is something that you'd have to look at?
I mean, obviously, yeah. I'm assuming that the underwriting was okay, and that the numbers work, and you got money to pay your bills, because obviously that comes first. Without money reaching to the bottom line, none of it works. But at the same time, you can, I do firmly believe that you can be a great landlord. You can be a contributor to the communities that you run, to the society as a whole, by doing the right thing, and still make a few bucks for ourselves. Yeah, just do the right thing, work hard, and look towards the future.
So leading that to the last question, to something I want. Obviously you've made a big impact into the MHP space, right? With being the largest operator in New York State. What's the impact? You want to look back, what's the impact you want to say that Cook Properties has had on the space or on the affordable housing industry?
Well, we're not done yet, so we're going to keep going here for many years. I'm super proud of our communities. I'm super proud of Cook Properties. All of our communities are in a better spot than they were when we bought it, hands down. There's no doubt in my mind, not only physically, but occupancy wise, resident quality wise, CapEx wise. So again, it kind of goes back to, just doing the right thing. So yeah, that's it feels good. It feels good to do the right thing and to reinvest. That's what we like to do. And like I said, we're going to be doing it for many years going forward.
Absolutely. Great stuff. Eric, any last words?
No, thanks a lot, Jeff, for having us. You definitely, we're from New York also, of course. So hearing your success story in New York is definitely valuable. We may have to start competing against you, Jeff. I'm only kidding. No interest.
I don't think
Frank's a very competitive person.
Yeah, I am very competitive, but I don't think I want to compete inside of New York State. I give you a lot of credit.
Yeah, I give you a lot of credit, Jeff.
I
give you a lot of credit, and it's
owning 7,000 lots in New York is like owning 25,000 lots anywhere else. So I give him a lot of credit. There was a lot to unravel today. I want to thank Jeff Cook for being part of the program. And if you've listened to this, if you have questions about your park or scaling up your business, drop us a message down below. We'd be happy to sit there, answer any questions that you have, and comment on this podcast. And feel free to share it to a friend or a colleague, somebody who's looking to scale their business in the MHP space. Until next time, everybody, thank you for listening. This has been the MHP Exchange podcast. Happy investing.